50% of the world researchers are Chinese, plus or minus. And they're mostly in China.
It's technology of the smallest kind.
Into a new era in AI, moving beyond its focus on chip-scale design to now rack-scale design. And I think it's fair to say that winning for NVIDIA for a long time used to be about building the best GPU possible.
From autos to manufacturing to data centers to communications, everything depends on semiconductors. Semiconductors are more important than oil.
We are on the brink of a second Cold War. Today's world no longer relies on oil as it did in the last century, but on something smaller than a grain of sand: semiconductors. These tiny chips have become the beating heart of everything we use, from smartphones to cars, from artificial intelligence systems to advanced weapons. But the striking paradox is that this highly complex global system depends heavily on a single geographic point. Entity, place, Taiwan, island in East Taiwan, average point in global power. And this is where the struggle begins. On one side, the entity country, United States, global United States ends and prevent any rival from accessing the most advanced technologies. On the other side, entity country, China, major global China, its own technological independence at any cost. But this is not just economic competition. It is a complete reshaping of the global balance of power.
The problem no longer fits inside one computer to be accelerated by one GPU. The problem that you're trying to solve is you would like to go faster than the number of computers that you add.
What makes this confrontation fundamentally different from any previous conflict is that semiconductors are no longer just an industrial component. They have become the hidden infrastructure of global power. Today, every smartphone, every military system, every artificial intelligence platform depends directly on these tiny chips. This is why semiconductors are often described as the new oil of the global economy, but with even greater strategic risk. The global semiconductor market exceeds $300 billion annually, but the real issue is not the size of the market. It is the distribution of power within it. China accounts for nearly half of global demand, yet controls only a limited share of advanced production. This creates a structural and strategic dependency on external sources. On the other hand, the United States dominates another critical layer: design and advanced technologies. Companies like NVIDIA, Intel, and AMD control the brain of the semiconductor industry, while manufacturing is outsourced, primarily to Taiwanverse. And this is where the hidden role of corporations becomes decisive. Companies such as TSMC in Taiwan do not just operate factories. They control over 90% of the world's most advanced chip manufacturing capacity, making them a strategic actor that, in some ways, rivals entire states. Meanwhile, American firms dominate intellectual property and chip design, giving Washington indirect leverage over global supply chains. From a geostrategic perspective, the world has entered a phase of fragile interdependence. One country dominates design, another dominates manufacturing, and others control critical resources. This interconnected system means that even minor disruptions can trigger global shocks. Economically, semiconductors now determine the strength of national economies, the competitiveness of industries, and even the balance of military power. So this is no longer a simple economic rivalry. It is a struggle over who will shape the future itself.
TSMC produces 90% of the most advanced processor chips. From Apple, whether it's an iPhone, or NVIDIA, which powers many data centers, TSMC produces many of their chips. And without TSMC's production, the entire digital economy would simply ground to a halt.
In this new Cold War, the conflict between the United States and China is not fought with weapons on a battlefield, but through control over the most critical technological infrastructure in the world: semiconductors. The United States has adopted a highly calculated strategy, not to dominate production alone, but to control the key choke points of the entire semiconductor ecosystem. Today, American companies lead in chip design, with giants like NVIDIA, Intel, and AMD controlling the brain behind the most advanced processors. Even more importantly, the US dominates electronic design automation software, the essential tools required to design any modern chip. But Washington did not stop there. In recent years, it has imposed strict export controls aimed directly at slowing China's technological rise. These measures include banning the export of advanced AI chips and restricting China's access to cutting-edge semiconductor manufacturing equipment. The US has also pressured key allies to align with this strategy, effectively transforming the global supply chain into a strategic network of containment. The impact has been significant. American semiconductor firms have lost billions of dollars in potential revenue, particularly in the Chinese market. Yet, from a geopolitical perspective, the objective is clear: to delay China's progress in critical sectors such as artificial intelligence and advanced military systems. However, this strategy comes with a structural weakness. Despite its technological dominance, the United States still depends heavily on external manufacturing, especially in Taiwan, where over 90% of the world's most advanced chips are produced. This creates a paradox. The global leader in technology relies on a geographically vulnerable node for production. On the other side, China's response has been both rapid and strategic. Beijing is not simply reacting. It is attempting a systemic transformation toward technological independence. Over the past decade, China has invested tens of billions of dollars into its domestic semiconductor industry, supporting national champions such as SMIC and Huawei, while aggressively developing local alternatives to Western technologies. At the same time, China has leveraged its position in the supply chain by restricting exports of critical raw materials like gallium and germanium, elements essential for semiconductor production worldwide. Despite these efforts, China still faces significant challenges. It lags behind by an estimated 4 to 5 years in advanced chip manufacturing, and its share of cutting-edge semiconductor production remains limited, around 6% globally. Yet, the internal shift is already visible. Recent data shows that Chinese companies now control over 40% of the domestic AI chip market, a sharp increase driven largely by US restrictions. In fact, the market share of American firms like NVIDIA in China has dropped from nearly 95% to around 55 to 60%, signaling a gradual but important shift in technological balance. This reveals a critical dynamic at the heart of this conflict. Open quote, "The United States is trying to preserve its dominance by controlling the system, while China is accelerating its efforts to rebuild that system from within." Close quote. From a broader geopolitical perspective, this is not just a competition of capabilities. It is a race against time. The United States seeks to freeze the current hierarchy of global technology before China can catch up. China, in contrast, is racing to achieve a level of self-sufficiency that would make external pressure ineffective. And in this high-stakes race, even partial success is enough to shift the balance. Because in the end, China does not need to surpass the United States entirely. It only needs to reduce its dependence enough to change the rules of the game.
As you know, in the world, this is the only company that currently has something they make in our possession right now. There are no others. So there's basically Air and TSMC.
This is not a future scenario. This war has already begun. But unlike traditional wars, it did not start with missiles or armies. It started with strategic decisions, technological restrictions, and control over the most critical industry in the world. The first clear move came in 2018, when the United States launched a direct strike against China by targeting Huawei, one of its most important technology champions. By placing the company on the entity list, Washington effectively cut it off from advanced chips, software ecosystems, and critical technologies. This was not just a sanction. It was a signal that technology itself had become a geopolitical weapon. By 2020, the conflict had escalated. The United States shifted its focus from targeting individual companies to targeting the entire technological ecosystem behind China's rise. It imposed restrictions on semiconductor exports, blocked access to advanced chip manufacturing equipment, and pressured global suppliers, especially in Taiwan, to halt cooperation with Chinese firms. At this stage, the strategy was no longer pressure. It had become containment. Then came a decisive turning point in 2022. Washington introduced sweeping restrictions on advanced AI chips and moved to block China's access to the most critical manufacturing technologies, particularly EUV lithography. At the same time, it coordinated with key allies such as Japan and Netherlands, transforming the conflict into a global technological blockade. The objective was clear: to freeze China's progress at a critical moment in its technological development. But China did not stand still. From 2023 onward, Beijing responded with a strategy built on acceleration and resilience. It poured tens of billions of dollars into its domestic semiconductor industry, strengthened national champions like SMIC and Huawei, and began developing local alternatives to Western technologies at an unprecedented pace. At the same time, China leveraged its position in global supply chains by restricting exports of critical raw materials such as gallium and germanium, elements essential for semiconductor production worldwide. The results have been striking. Chinese firms now control over 40% of the domestic AI chip market, while the share of American companies like NVIDIA in China has dropped dramatically, from nearly 95% to around 55 to 60%. In other words, the very restrictions designed to slow China down have also forced it to accelerate its path toward technological independence. Today, the battlefield has expanded into a complex, multi-dimensional struggle. On the technological front, the United States still leads in advanced innovation, but China is closing the gap faster than expected. In supply chains, both sides remain deeply interdependent, making disruption a shared risk. In alliances, the United States operates within a powerful global network, while China leverages the scale of its domestic market and state-driven strategy. And at the center of it all, private companies have become geopolitical actors, no longer just economic entities, but strategic tools in a global power struggle. So who is likely to win? The answer depends on how this war is defined. If it is a race for cutting-edge technological superiority, the United States still holds the advantage. But if it becomes a test of endurance, adaptation, and long-term independence, China may be better positioned than many expected. Because in reality, this is not a war that ends with a clear victory. It is a transformation, one that is already reshaping the global system into two competing technological spheres. And the most important truth is this: the war has already begun, and the real question is no longer who starts it, but who can sustain it the longest.